do the congressional reports, and you can summarize and give some instances, what do the congressional reports tell us about the FBI's use of the media in general, but then particularly as it relates to Dr. King?
Well, in general, the first thing they show is that throughout its history, the FBI has made relations with the media a key area. Not so much infiltrating employees as the CIA did, but cultivating very, very deep connections throughout the American media. They had the entire division of the FBI, the crime reporting division, was dealing solely with developing friendly journalists, developing ways in which you could get what you wanted to appear in the papers to be there and what you didn't want not to be there, on a level that was nobody realized until these reports came out. The crime reporting division was keeping track of virtually every journalist in America that wrote anything that had to do with the FBI, and whether everything was being classified as friendly or unfriendly. Of course, it was somewhat complicated because it generally meant, did J. Edgar Hoover like what they wrote or not like what they wrote? And practically the opinion of nobody else at the FBI mattered while Hoover was alive. But he kept charts on every significant journalist as to who was helpful. And when you look through the reports and the documents that have come out, you'll see statements by Hoover and his immediate subordinates: get this information to friendly journalists. Get this to our friend at U.S. News and World Report. Get this to some friendly reporters in Memphis. And you just see all that sort of stuff. Interestingly, though, this information, it never mattered whether the information was true or false. That was not what it was about. You find FBI planting information that's true, you find them planting information that's false. The critical thing was if they had the friend at that media place, that friend was going to run what they wanted without investigating.
Could you just cut through, tell us what the Church Committee said about Quantal Pro reports and explain to the court of the jury what the Quantal Pro activity?
Right. COINTELPRO was counterintelligence program, and that was the major FBI program to counter what it conceived to be threats to American democracy, and it was, at least in my opinion, rather paranoid in what it considered threats. It had divisions trying to operate against communists, against socialists, against the new left, against the old left, against what they referred to as black nationalists, what they referred to as hate groups. They had a separate section just on the Nation of Islam. They had a separate section on the Civil Rights Movement. They had a hybrid program on Communfil, which was to deal with the possibility that communists were infiltrating non-communist groups. So they had one section trying to disrupt groups they felt were communist influenced or dangerous, and another one trying to infiltrate groups or find out about groups that they thought other people were infiltrating. Basically, they, and of course you have to understand that the counterintelligence program was really a misnomer, because counterintelligence normally means you're trying to find things out. Counterintelligence officers in wartime and in espionage are supposed to be finding out information, but these were active committees, not passive, and what counterintelligence programs were overt attempts, sometimes very, very complicated operations, to disrupt organizations which they felt were a threat, regardless of whether the organizations were committing any crimes. And the irony of this is that while the FBI theoretically was supposed to limit itself to investigating crimes, and federal crimes at that, it basically took the position that, thinking bad thoughts was a crime, or if you didn't like the current government of that day, that was a crime, and if J. Edgar Hoover decided the group should be disrupted, then COINTELPRO would sit down and figure out how to disrupt it.
Where was Dr. King in this constellation? How did they regard him, and how was he targeted?
Well, he was just about the top of the list in terms of J. Edgar Hoover for reasons that are still unclear. Many books have been written about J. Edgar Hoover, and I don't think anybody quite understands what made him tick. He hated Dr. King. He made no bones about it. He said, I mean, he would send letters referring to him as garbage, referring to him as slime, referring to when Martin Luther King was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, he wrote this long diatribe about how that was the most ridiculous thing he'd ever heard in his life, and in fact started a whole program to try and disrupt the Nobel Peace Prize program. But he and the SCLC, as Dr. King's organization, were by themselves a major target of the FBI from early on. He certainly was being investigated in the 50s. It wasn't until the early 60s that it really intensified. But Hoover was much more public about Dr. King than almost any other individual. He would be public about the communists or the terrorists or the whatever. But Martin Luther King, he specifically used the most horrendous language to describe him. Once went on the only time he ever gave a press interview, called Martin Luther King the most notorious liar in the history of the United States. And he was saying that because King had the temerity to say that the FBI agents in the South weren't being terribly helpful to blacks who were having problems with racism.
Can you give an example of some of the media operations that the FBI under Hoover mounted against Dr. King's organization?
Sure. The first really significant ones were to suggest that the Southern Christian Leadership Conference was communist infiltrated and communist dominated. The FBI had prepared dossiers on King and on everybody who was working with him, and they had two people who were close to Dr. King who had at some time in the past had some affiliations with communists. You should understand, because this came out later, they had no evidence whatsoever that either of these two people was at that time a communist, or that either of these two people was trying to impose some communist line on Dr. King, but they decided to say that anyway. And they prepared dossiers on these two people. One was a white lawyer, Stanley Levinson, and the other was a black organizer named Jack Odell. And what they did is the same way, get us a friend at this paper, get us a friend there, they started planting stories, and I think I've
let me
give you one of the
let's call up on the stand one of the stories, screen one of the stories that they planted.
That's the second page. I think the headline is right. This was a major story about Jack Odell and an attempt to. I mean, they were attempting to discredit Dr. King and the organization. They were not trying to just get rid of Odell because that would be better for the organization. But they spread this particular clipping, I believe, is from the Atlanta Constitution. But it says in it that it makes reference to prior articles in the St. Louis Globe Democrat and the New Orleans Times Picayune. The story, which was essentially based on the FBI spreading this information, appeared all over the country.